is Nesanette Daniel. This class is for crisis response and trauma care at Houston Christian University. This is for assignment video response 2. I will be discussing video needs and challenges of disaster in module 6. So I'm going to be answering a few questions to begin with. I will be I'll be responding to the question, what are the needs and challenges of the heroic phase? For the heroic phase, for crisis and trauma counseling, specifically those mentioned in the video needs and challenges of disaster, which discusses the different phases of disaster relief. Specifically, the example that's being used is that of Katrina. To explain what is going on in the heroic phase and the needs and challenges, this is actually a time when people are very, very energized. People are very, very motivated. This is a time when there is a lot of pouring into the victims of the disaster, pouring into the victims of Katrina, whether it be through financial aid, food aid. People are coming in from all over the country to come and lift up and motivate and help these people. And there is this heightened sense of hope. There is a heightened sense of motivation and a sort of energizing energy that everybody has. During this time, people are super motivated. Everyone is coming together. Everyone is forming community. Mental health counselors tend to, there's almost a disillusioned sense of hope. It's almost like they've become a little bit delusional to the long-term impact, because the flow of aid and positivity and encouragement is so high. So counselors tend to overwork during this time. They will work many, many hours a day. They will work sometimes 7 days a week. And it's almost like being on a high of hope and positivity. And while it seems wonderful as it's happening, it can kind of be a trap, because during this time they are creating something that is unsustainable, working that many hours, because this is a long-term recovery that has to happen, especially in the case of Katrina. So during this time, people become so elated and happy to do what they're doing, but they're not realizing that the pace that they're going is not actually sustainable. So counselors have to be very, very aware of that. Mental health responders have to be very aware of that, so as not to prevent burnout, because during this time it can lead to burnout, because they have been kind of going full gas on something that is sure to be that heroic phase is very, very short. It's not short, but it's very, very temporary. There's sort of like a denial about what's going on, and that denial for that time is good because it protects you, but that denial can also create just an unsustainable pace, which leads into the honeymoon phase. The second question is, can the honeymoon phase include a crash point? Describe who, when, and why this may occur. So just as I said, the honeymoon phase, it tends to lead to a crash point, because the heightened sense of positivity, the full throttle gas that everyone is going on during the honeymoon phase, this is how it leads to the crash point. It is because of that sense of denial that is sort of protecting everyone in that crisis situation from becoming too overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. It's also not making them aware of the pace that they're going, and they go too hard, too fast, too quickly, and they get to a point where they've done so much and responded to so much and been so, but they start to become very, very aware suddenly that disillusionment leaves, that denial leaves, and they suddenly are aware that, oh, this is going to be a journey that is not going to end next year or the year after. It's going to be a long-term recovery, rebuilding. And so in that crash point, people might become compassion fits. They might suffer from compassion fatigue. They might suffer from burnout. They might become overwhelmed by how much they feel like they've already done, but they realize how much still needs to be done. It's something that has to be counselors and any crisis trauma responders need to be aware of. There's a lot of physical exhaustion. There's also, even though the actual crisis has ended, Katrina has ended, the storm has ended, those few weeks after, there's also still a major rise in death tolls and injury, especially for the elderly. Many elderly people tend to die in the weeks and months after Katrina. Elderly and the young. Partially for lack of resources, because of everything that's happening, the devastation of everything that's happening, because of the toll it's taking, because that honeymoon phase is actually phasing out. So even the term honeymoon phase, it doesn't always apply, because even though there is a sense of hope and encouragement, there is also a sense of like, it's like a car running on E, trying to go full throttle but running on E. So it's both physical and emotional toll, and especially the elderly, especially the young. This just tends to be a time where they are very vulnerable. The third question is, during the disillusionment phase, fear, anger, and hopelessness can set in. What type of clinical conditions may develop from these circumstances, and what type of treatment is best to overcome them? So during the disillusionment phase, you see an influx you see early signs of PTSD. This is when clients and responders, there tends to be a big wave, as told by the woman in the video. There tends to be a big increase in people seeking mental health services, to the point where there's a waiting list. There's an increase in addiction and addiction with co-occurring trauma, addiction induced by trauma. There's a lot of trauma, gambling, alcohol, and drug use. The amount of stress that is put on families, especially in a time when there's, poverty is a direct result, and people are out of their homes. People have lost everything, and gambling and alcohol and just ways of trying to escape these things, for whatever reason, tend to be very accessible. So a lot of this time, it's just the stress is very, very difficult on families. We have to have compassion. I think sometimes people tend to be judgmental of those that automatically resort to self-medication, even self-destructive self-medication. But we have to be aware of the amount of stress that's on these families. It's a very, very difficult and long enduring time. So it tends to push a lot of people into self-destructive behavior in order to cope. There's also large waves of suicide during this time. It can be a very, very difficult time. Some tips to provide support during this time are to provide support especially during the disillusionment phase. You can provide support and other and services is trying to take up the space that the nonprofits that are now phasing out, that are moving out, providing and implementing ways of taking those spaces and letting them be long term. Focusing on burnout prevention for people who are still providing direct services for the counselors. If you are someone who's coming in during this phase, how can you help the counselors and the mental health providers that have been there and who have been there from the beginning, who are the veterans, and how can you help them prevent burnout, provide specific community health training. I'm sure, and especially at a time such as Katrina, this was very, very helpful. Encourage and refer people to mental health services. We can also provide recreation events for stress reduction. I can attest to the power of recreation and activity and sports and being physically fit, and encouraging hope and healing through Christ. This is something I personally look forward to implementing in my work as a future potential crisis counselor, and fostering community versus isolation. I think that is very, very vital. Nothing positive comes out of isolation during disaster. It is needed. As believers, I believe God also has commanded this of us. He said it's not good for man to be alone, and he was talking about community. It is good to our enemy, the enemy and our minds get attacked especially during times of devastation. So that concludes my video. I will say that I have included the references in my video. The reference is the video that I'm referencing is actually the needs and challenges of disaster. Again, this is video response 2 for crisis and trauma care. Thank you so much.